right. Well, good morning to everyone, and we're excited this morning to announce the House Republican priority for the 2026 session. We are in the midst of our short session, and we've hit the ground running this year to deliver for Hoosiers. And this year, we're focused on lowering costs for Hoosier families and reducing government to unleash opportunity. We've worked hard in recent years to put Indiana in a very strong position, growing our economy, attracting new residents, and cutting taxes. Last session, we advanced more than $1 billion in tax cuts taking effect this year and next. We know the cost of living is top of mind for so many Hoosiers, and families are sitting around the dinner table worried about making ends meet. That's why we're focusing on making sure Indiana remains a low cost of living state and one that Hoosiers experience economic freedom. The best way to reduce cost burdens on Hoosiers is for government to get out of their way, grow our economy, and unleash opportunity. Our priorities are aimed at continuing Indiana's momentum while addressing some of the highest costs facing Hoosiers, including the cost of owning a home and energy costs. Last session, we tackled several cost reduction efforts, including healthcare, housing, and energy, and that work will continue this year. We'll have 4 priority bills this session. And as always, we'll be working on several other important issues. I'll turn over our bill's authors to each of them to share a little bit more about their legislation to lower costs for Hoosiers. Chairman Millett.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's my privilege this morning to share my thoughts on House Bill 1001, and this is dealing with housing. Since 2023, House Republicans have made it a priority to increase housing stock in the state of Indiana. We've invested nearly $75 million to support housing across the state in our last 2 budget cycles, which is a phenomenal investment for Hoosiers. And this was done through the Residential Housing Infrastructure Fund. We also passed House Enrolled Act 1005 last year to help ensure that communities that access this funding would not create any unnecessary regulations. Yet costs to own a home, they remain high. We've constrained supply far too long in the state with unnecessary and problematic regulations and restrictions. We want to help more Hoosier families and Hoosiers, period, achieve the American dream of owning a home. That's the foundation of our society. The bill delivers housing affordability by limiting local mandates, eliminating unnecessary design requirements, reforming fees, and reducing pass-through costs to renters and homeowners. In addition, House Bill 1001 increases transparency and accountability by requiring local governments for the first time to report various housing development metrics to identify and address bottlenecks. We don't know what we don't know. It expands housing supply by replacing discretionary hearings with objective standards and providing predictable, timely approvals where housing is already allowed. It makes it easier to convert commercial buildings into housing, and while modernizing building standards that unnecessarily increase housing cost. And it allows homeowners, faith-based organizations, and developers to build housing that complies with adopted plans and zoning rules without facing shifting standards or prolonged delays. The General Assembly wants to support our growing communities and make it easier and more affordable to own a home and build a life in Indiana. It's now my pleasure to introduce Representative Elena Schunkweiler.
It's my honor to introduce House Bill 1002. House Bill 1002 prioritizes Hoosier ratepayers and promotes transparent and cost-effective practices among utilities. Indiana's regulatory structure has served us well for generations. It has provided stability, supported investment, and delivered dependable service across Indiana. But that framework was built for a very different energy era. Energy market economics, energy technologies, federal and state policies, aging generation plants, and the pressure on our utilities have changed. Today's energy landscape demands a more modern approach, one that aligns utility decision-making with the priorities we've set in state law and with real-world expectations of Hoosier families. Indiana's average residential electric rate is over 15% lower than the national average, and our rates are the lowest in the Great Lakes region. Yet, Hoosiers are still feeling the financial burden of heating, cooling, and lighting their homes. Again, House Bill 1002 prioritizes Hoosier ratepayers and promotes transparent and cost-effective practices among utilities. In many ways, what we are doing is simple. We are updating our regulatory tools so utilities are held accountable for delivering the outcomes we want: strong reliability, improved resilience, and better affordability. This is the essence of performance-based rate making, or PBR, and while PBR is not new nationally, this legislation marks Indiana's first significant step. Through performance-based rate making, a framework that connects utilities' revenue and profit to their ability to successfully meet the needs of residential consumers, we are holding utilities accountable and keeping rates affordable. This framework would create multi-year rate plans for utility rate increases, including performance incentives and disincentives in target areas like service restoration, reliability, and affordability. Through fixed monthly payments and improved budget billing processes, ratepayers will be able to predict monthly electric expenses. And through increased grace periods on termination of services, we are protecting struggling Hoosiers in the hottest and coldest months of the year. Our goal is to promote reliability, affordability, resilience, stability, and environmental sustainability, the 5 pillars of energy for the Hoosier State, and House Bill 1002 will help us achieve them. It's now my pleasure to introduce Chairman Bartels.
Well, good morning. So I think the speaker said it eloquently when he said less government, to get government out of the way. And so House Bill 1003 is an attempt to do that. So this is a product over 3 years of work. The intent here is to increase government efficiency and the effectiveness. And the goal through that was to accomplish that through eliminating, sunsetting, restructuring. You like that? Restructuring dozens of redundant inactive boards and commissions. Now, the intent is not necessarily to specifically save money, but there is a cost savings factors to this. So through this, most of this will be transferred, these duties from these current boards and commissions to other boards and commissions or agencies. And so with that, I'll introduce Chairman Bob Baden.
Thank you, Representative Bartels. Thank you very much for the opportunity to be here today. I have House Bill 1004, and House Bill 1004 is another bite at the apple at reduction in terms of regulations for our K-12 schools. This legislation improves Indiana's education framework by removing restrictive, redundant, and unnecessary statutory requirements across state and local education entities. And specifically, it cleans up conflicting definitions, confusing compliance requirements, and unused programs and funds throughout the Indiana's code. You know that last year we had House Bill 1002 that started this process. It is a multi-year process. We actually, with legislation 1004, we eliminate 19,357 words in the Indiana Title 20 code. Last year we eliminated almost 35,000 words in Indiana code. The goal is to really get out of the way, let educators do what they do best, and try to reduce the amount of regulations that we have. I also want to end by thanking Legislative Service Agency. This has been an unbelievable undertaking in terms of time and effort. And I also want to make everybody aware that all 4 caucuses were given an opportunity to be engaged in this process, as well as almost every education statewide organization, including charters, non-publics, traditional publics, even unions. All of them had an opportunity this year to really get involved and provide to us the suggestions in terms of regulations that they would like to have eliminated, as well as your Superintendent's Association principals, et cetera. So it was a collaborative effort. I want to thank everybody, and with that, look forward to working through the session. And I'll turn it back over to Speaker Houston.
Well, First, let me thank these four wonderful people. I think they've done a tremendous job. You do work with stakeholder groups on all this. They've done a tremendous job of working with the groups to get the bills, and the bills will go through the process as they always do. We'll be happy to take feedback and ways that the bills can be improved. But we worked with the stakeholder groups to get a really good beginning product, and they will navigate this process moving forward. But again, we believe that the best way to support Hoosiers is to give them as much economic freedom as possible, and to get the heck out of the way and let them achieve what I think you're seeing. The last revenue forecast shows we're outpacing everybody in the Midwest, and what we're doing is working. Let's just continue to build on it. So with that, I'll take questions on this issue.
Mr. Speaker, Miller, on the housing bill. So are you taking some decision making out of the hands of local authorities? Can you explain a little bit more about how that's going to work?
I don't know that we're taking decision-making away from local authorities. What we're actually doing is working within the guidelines that they already operate and say, look, take a look at your statutes, take a look at your zoning process, take a look at your architectural standards, step back away from that at 30,000 feet and say, do we really need these, right? We have to get housing into the marketplace. Right now, Indiana is 50,000 living units short. Right, and so local government controls the supply of housing. The state can set the guidelines, but local units, they have total control about how fast that product gets to the marketplace. So we've worked for 8.5 months with local government, with public sector partners. We've worked with private sector partners, and we've all determined that putting common sense rules in place, streamlining guidelines, streamlining processes is the most effective and efficient way to get more product to the marketplace that's safe and affordable. And the coolest thing about this bill, one provision that I really love, is the yes in God's backyard language, because we're empowering churches and other entities to get involved in the process, something they're already doing, but we're actually encouraging our locals to say, let these entities do what they do best, and that's exciting.
Question for Representative Schonkweiler. You had mentioned you were considering a provision in this bill to subsidize utility costs for low-income Hoosiers. Could you speak to provisions that do that in this bill, or if it made it to this version of the bill?
Yes, so we are looking at the cost recovery for our investor-owned utilities and taking a percentage of that and reattributing it to a low-income program to subsidize that. That's to answer your question. It is in the third part of the bill on low income and affordability.
Mr. Speaker, on the issue of reducing the size and scope of government, obviously it says enacted boards and commissions. Why not go after township government? Because that's where the rubber hits the road, and for a lot of Hoosiers.
Well, we're going to have that discussion, Abdul. Not a priority bill, but I believe Representative Schunkweiler actually has that bill, and we've been working with local government officials on that. Look, I think we have universally, I think there's universal agreement among many of us that we have too much local government in this state, too many both local government entities and non-elected taxing units. So we're going to have that conversation. It isn't a priority bill, but that will be a bill that I'm sure there'll be a lot of discussion about. And we've had great conversations with the Township Trustee Association, and others have been partners in that. And we'd like to see some government modernization. And I think you'll see that bill have a hearing and a lot of conversation.
Representative Bartels, you had mentioned some cost savings and efficiency that you were looking for. Just didn't know if you could expand on that, especially since the fiscal note mentions that the various changes to boards and commissions would be expected to, quote, have a minimal decrease in state expenditures and workload.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the intent, the beginning intent is not to necessarily save money, it's efficiency. So when you take two boards that are doing similar activities and governing certain bodies, by combining them and reducing the number of the boards, you become more efficient inherently. So that's kind of what we're looking at. There's some boards that do nothing, they have not met, those ones that we were just sunsetting. So through that, per diem, less per diem, those kind of things, there's some cost savings, but that's not the initial intent.
How do you measure the success of that, of reducing that? How do you measure if services will improve for Hoosiers through that, or money will be saved? Let's look at the numbers.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, as we go through this process, we start changing some things through this process. That will change, but ultimately, when we look at this, we're not looking at things specifically. What I've changed would affect the citizens. We're just moving the governing body into more efficiency, and that's the intent. So when you look at a couple of these things, when you read the bill, you'll see that, oh, that makes sense. This makes sense to merge with this, and they cover kind of the same topics. There's no reason to have two. And there's like advisory boards. Their intent was to be stood up to get something established in another commission or another agency, and they're still meeting, and they're not really providing any usefulness to what they originally did. Those are the kind of things we're trying to look at.
And I just want to say, I really appreciate Representative Bartel, Chairman Bartel's efforts on this. Look, when two different groups are meeting and the topics are largely overlapping, you're creating multiple work streams out of that. And oftentimes those work streams are not even congruent with one another. And so I think what he's doing, what this bill does, is to make sure that there's less of them and that we aren't sending mixed signals or having people doing, two boards are seeing the same topic and yet coming to two different proposals. So I think appreciate his leadership on that.
Next week marks 1 year with the new governor. What stands out to you about that first year, and what is the status of the legislature's relationship with Governor Braun?
Oh, it's very good, and I think Governor Braun hit the ground running and is doing everything he can to, I think, continue the forward momentum that's taking place across Indiana. I think you're seeing that again. A lot of statistics, whether it's in reading or in economic development or that have taken place, that shows we've made tremendous progress. I think he and his team have continued to build on that.
Going back to these boards and commissions, are the majority of them, for example, within the realm of healthcare or education? Is there a specific topic?
It crosses the entire spectrum.
Mr. Speaker, you mentioned revenues, and are just wondering, are you comfortable with the state building a $5 billion surplus after we just went through a round of cuts, some state employees have lost jobs, etc.? Will that be a part of the discussion or in consideration of this session? I know it's short, it's not a budget session, but...
No, and look, we're not going to open up the budget. I think a couple of things is, we got a surprise in April and candidly, and we had to adjust to that surprise. I think we did it. We did it effectively. I appreciate the leadership of the administration, our partners in the Senate to make that happen. I think people have adjusted to it. We got a little bit of a different surprise in December. Probably suggests to me that we probably should wait and see how this all shakes out. We know going into 27, there are all sorts of changes taking place economically at the federal level and those types of things, and we really should probably wait to see how all that turns out so we have a strong budget session in 27.
Mr. Speaker, anything on property taxes this session, or are we going to wait until 2027?
We'll have some. We've been working with our local government partners on some tweaks to SEA 1, but we're going to ensure that we said it, we're on track. I just got an update yesterday that the majority of Hoosier homeowners are going to pay less in property taxes in 2026 than they did in 2025. I want to know what else they're paying less on. So I think we'll have some tweaks based upon some feedback we've gotten, but any significant changes would wait until 27.
Representative Bartels, your bill 1003 would create the Indiana Cultural Commission, and it looks like, if I'm reading it right, it would fold the Native American Indian Affairs Commission, Indiana Commission for Women, some others. I didn't know if you could kind of walk through what that process is going to look like and the reasoning behind it.
Yeah, the one thing that talking to all the stakeholders, they agree that change is needed. I would say the difference is how we accomplish that. Status quo is not working for these cultural commissions. And so, and working with everybody, we kind of came up with this kind of pot, calling it this Indiana Cultural Commission, and dedicating people to helping the folks and our citizens that fall in those areas. It's been welcomed. I think that we're just going to be starting tweaking some of the board. And then, there's been a promise that there's no funding decrease. So once again, this is not, the intent has nothing to do with trying to decrease money. And let it be known, I'm going to try and get a little extra money if we can. So that's intent. I think that the status quo, everybody in those stakeholders know that's not working. everybody's been fairly agreeable about this, and maybe a little tweak on some of the board makeup. So,
Representative Schonfleiler, could you speak to some of the incentives and disincentives in your
Sure.
bill? How do you like to see the carrot versus the stick approach work?
You know, I'll go back to this is an incremental step for Indiana. So performance-based rate making and performance incentive metrics, multi-year rate plans is not a new concept nationally. But it is for Indiana. The investor-owned utilities already report several things to that IURC on an annual basis. And two of those things we are including as metrics from a resilience, from like shortages, outages, things like that. Those will be included in the incentive metric. How quickly do Hoosiers get their lights turned back on when an outage occurs? That matters, right? It matters it's really a life safety issue. So when we look at that, we're also looking at affordability. That will be the new metric that we have worked with our stakeholders trying to create. And how do you do that and capture that when investor-owned utilities serve different demographics, different climates, really in the state of Indiana? They face different needs. So we are working with our stakeholders, and we're using the National Electricity Consumer Price Index. Sorry, the acronym. So we're using that as the metric and holding utilities to that. And as long as they stay within that, think about performance incentive metrics much like you review your employees, or like a business reviews and employees. You hold them accountable to what outcomes you want, and then that's you incentivize them for doing a good job or meeting your expectations, and you put them on a performance improvement plan if they're not meeting your expectations, and that's what we're doing here.
Speaker, there's been a few big ticket items that some folks want regarding MLS potentially for Indianapolis, Chicago Bears, potentially sniffing around Northwest Indiana. You mentioned not reopening the budget this session. Are those two items things you envision perhaps kicking to 2027? Are you having talks on those in this session?
I think the conversation specifically around the Bears in Northwest Indiana needs to take place this year. So I would anticipate that conversation taking place this year. I don't anticipate that conversation on MLS to take place this year. There's a different timing issue on both those.
And then there's been a few bills filed regarding the IADC. Are those things that you're looking at? Any comments on those?
Well, look, I think we're all trying to find the right balance on economic development, and unapologetically, we've been on a roll. And people want to invest here. People want to come here. We need to continue that. I mean, part of the reason when you look in the December forecast, which we've seen in the April forecast, there were just some other measurements that held that back a little bit. Was the fact that we are having a tremendous amount of economic development taking place across the state, adding new investment, new jobs. I love our population numbers. And so, we need to find that right balance. I don't think pulling back from economic development makes any sense. And I think that the governor and his team are, they've kind of had a chance to evaluate where they want to move forward. I think you can do both effectively. You can grow Main Street and invest in Main Street, but then also attract new businesses and new investments. I think we have to do both. I think our local partners are incredibly important in this discussion, as are our utility partners are incredibly important in this discussion.
There's been activity at the federal level lately with the Delta 8 products and also the regular marijuana rescheduling. With all that happening, do you anticipate any movement this session on either of those?
Well, I think the Delta 8 conversation kind of got settled within the One Beautiful Bill, and so you might see some conformity to that. I would not anticipate anything on the marijuana discussion.
Mr. Speaker, on the energy issue, obviously data centers are a big issue now in Indiana. They consume a lot of energy. There's talk about utilities, water resources. Do you folks see any legislation either regulating data centers or maybe limiting local government's control as to where data centers can go?
We're having conversations with our partners in local government. We want to make sure the facts are out there, right? The facts are this. First of all, the water, the vast majority of the water that's used by a data center is recycled. I mean, some less than 10% of it turns into steam. The rest is either recycled within the facility or discharged. So I think the water discussion, by the way, we've had two comprehensive studies, one by the Indiana Finance Authority, one by the Indiana Chamber of Commerce, that says good news in Indiana, water is a a strength of ours. So we need to make sure that narrative gets out there stronger. As I noted in my org day speech, the fact of the matter is like big power users actually reduce rates for all of us, the individual ratepayers. And so, we are trying to help people understand that. We understand and recognize that we want to honor and respect local government, and they're prioritizing what's best in their community. But I do think some of the narratives around this stuff is we've got to do a better job of messaging. Look, we noted in this, and we said this consistently as we passed SE 8-1. You want to reduce property taxes, the best way to reduce property taxes is to increase assessed valuation. So think about what your proper growth is, and this is what my message to every local municipality and local government comes in, is like, you have to have a growth strategy. It has to meet the concerns of your citizens and the concerns of the folks that are your constituents. But the fact of the matter is we have to continue to grow. I think the growth has been beneficial to Indiana. We've seen that in the last 2 decades. We need to figure out a way to build that. I think, whether it's a data center, another large power user, a large manufacturer, we want to be a welcoming state. We have been a welcoming state to that. We have to do a better job of communicating what the benefits are.
Representative Baiman, could you give more detail as to which key regulations this bill seeks to remove or modify?
Oh, there's so many in there. I mean, like I said, we had a number of groups participate. I'll give you one example. In the past, we've had legislation regarding takeovers and regarding low-performing schools. That's still in the books. There's still information. We repealed that in the bill because we feel like that's no longer a practice that has been successful. We have not utilized it in the past. But there's just a number of statutes, funds that have not been utilized. And we know we still got a lot more work to do because it was our staff has been tremendous in terms of helping pull this all together. But as you start driving into things, you find things being weaved into multiple places, not just all in Title 20. And so as we try to reduce some of the regulations, I mean, in terms of payroll and how that has to be handled, we're trying to get out of the way, let K-12 do more of that, and not have all these regulations that set up kind of moved more towards professionalizing the whole industry of education as opposed to having a manufacturing type thing where this is what they have to do and these are the inputs. So there's just a number of things in there. That would be one of the examples I would use.
You said this is a multi-year process. Is this a type of bill you think that we will continue to see after this year? Is there a point where you say we...
I think at some point we'll get to the point where we may not have additional, but I know already, like I said, it has been very time intensive. When you look at 19,000 words, but there are a lot of words have meanings, and there's a lot of significant impact. And so every one of those suggestions and code sites, you have to go through and see exactly what kind of impact this has. And so the time it took, we already have taken a number of things that was, and we'll have to put this till next year because we just don't have time to deal with it. We started in June and really have been working throughout the year, and like I said, it has been, I think when you hear in committee, you'll hear a lot of the groups come forward and talk about how collaborative we were and how we really have been trying to help all of the groups see some additional deregulation and opportunities to really change the way we move and do business.
Representative Miller, can you speak to the accessory dwelling unit language in your bill?
Sure, happy to do that. So many states have passed legislation that basically says accessory dwelling units are a permitted use. In Indiana, we don't quite get there yet, so my legislation basically says that accessory dwelling units are a permitted use without rezoning. And the additional caveat with that is that utility companies have to hook up, and they can't deny the hookups. The total purpose of that, right, is we have space. We have homes sitting in subdivisions. We've got homes sitting in the city. There's land to do that. And many of our families, because of the high cost of entry-level housing, need options for not only family members, but perhaps for for lack of a better word, a mother-in-law unit, right? And this creates that specific opportunity, and it creates a space where the lot's already zoned, they're not using the backyard, so we create a living space. We improve density, we improve efficiency, and we've got utilities there, so we're not doing any extensions. And it's just a common sense approach to increasing housing supply. Florida, Texas, California already do that, several other states, so it's a good, we learn from other states. We don't try to operate in a cloistered environment here.
Representative Baining, what's the plan for the recommendations that came out of ILEA?
Well, the bill was introduced yesterday, and the plan is to hear it Monday. We'll have a hearing Monday at 9:30 a.m. If you look at the bill, it is we tried to model as closely as we could to the recommendations. I'm pleased that it came out of the alliance by a vote of 8-1. So I think it's a really sound recommendation from the local community that this is a positive and a step they want to move forward. The devil's going to be in the details because they kind of provided us a skeleton, and now we have to put some meat on that skeleton. So we will. We know we have issues, for instance, in regards to how the levy will work, that this new municipal corporation will have levying authority. We know that bond issues, we want to make sure we protect all of those issues. So there will be a lot of details that will have to be continue to be debated and put into place. But I'm excited. Representative Delaney and I have had some discussion. Representative Delaney has indicated, I hope he will come on as a co-author on Monday. He had indicated before that he was willing to do it. I just gave him the final version, wanted to make sure he was totally comfortable with that. So it's going to be a tough task because it's not an easy principle to move forward. It's kind of a totally new idea, not just in Indiana, but nationally when you start looking at the charter movement and looking at kind of having a municipal authority control all of those assets is going to be, I think, a great opportunity for us to provide services for all of our kids in our education community in an IPS footprint.
Can I add on that?
Sure.
So, first of all, let me begin by saying I've followed this process, and tremendous credit to Mayor Hogsett, who just did a phenomenal job, I think, leading this, and to Dr. Johnson for their incredible work. It began with they put exceptional people on that committee, and I when they both told me who they put on that committee, I was blown away. I knew at that point they were committed to at least having a very thorough discussion about this. I know it was an incredibly collaborative effort with all of them to get to an 8-1 vote, and they gave us very, very, very strong recommendations. I think very, very good recommendations. Our interest all along has been we want a strong, stable IPS. And we then want to serve all the kids in that school district, including kids that are in the charter schools, which is, I think, the majority of kids actually in the district. But to see the collaboration and cooperation that's been led by the mayor and by Dr. Johnson has been phenomenal. And I've told them both I couldn't be any more appreciative of it. I think we've got some job to do, as Chairman Bain said. There's some gaps and details that frankly they shouldn't have tried to resolve, and we'll work together with them to do it. But they gave us such a strong framework. As the chairman noted, it'll probably be a bit challenging, but I think we're kind of committed to trying to get that challenge across the finish line. But it began with the fact that they just did, I thought, a phenomenal job, and Mayor Hogsett, Dr. Johnson, and all that group. I think it was a outstanding process for all of us to learn from. That shows that people who sometimes come with different opinions, different ideas, can collaboratively get to a spot, and credit to them for doing that.
Mr. Speaker, one quick question. Obviously, new session officially starts last month. There's always one issue that always kind of pops up around Valentine's Day that kind of throws it in.
It's going to be a little late this year.
Okay, did that happen already with redistricting?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, like we deal with a lot of different issues, and I'm sure there'll be something that will pop up that will cause, is every session. You never know what might show up on your doorstep, but we'll work through it.
Mr. Speaker, given the short calendar this year, do you anticipate any Friday sessions?
Gosh, I hope not. So no, look, we've been able to manage through that. We'll continue to work with our House Democratic partners on what the calendar looks like, but we've been able to navigate without having to do that. We're a citizen legislature, and at the end of the day, people need to get back home. Oftentimes we're doing community events, town halls, those things. Other times you got to get back to work, and so want to honor Friday and getting that done.
Representative Bain talked about redesigning state takeovers of schools. Do you have any ideas for how the state can handle families? Do you think that was the ability framework that the state board has?
Yeah, actually, there's language in 1266 that specifically charges the Secretary of Education to come up with platform and actually policies to deal with low-performing schools. We know that accountability is getting ready. Hopefully, it will be passed next Wednesday at State Board, and with that, then we want to make sure that there's schools understand that here's kind of the roadmap, and here's kind of the consequences, and what the state sees moving forward. So there's language in 1266 that deals specifically with that.
I want to add on to the chairman for a second on this topic. I think, if you've been in the building, you've heard a lot about deregulation. So I appreciate the chairman, the committee, and all the stakeholders working on this. It's one of those things that's oftentimes asked for, but oftentimes hard to accomplish, much to my frustration, as the chairman knows, because I'm a big dereg guy. Second of all, there's been a lot of discussion about education policy on the House floor and across the state. And I think, if you look at the metrics, we have a lot to celebrate. Whether it be on reading, graduation rates, what we're doing at the high school level. This deregulation is just to continue to build on that. To create, we know the system needs to change. We want to create a flexible system to do it. And by the way, we've shown the House priorities have worked. They continue to work. We'll continue to build on them. Anything else? Thank you guys. Appreciate it. Have a good afternoon and weekend.